Hello, everyone, and welcome to Loving My Veteran 101. This is actually part one of a three-part series, and it helps you find a starting place. So, before we get started, my name is Stacy. I'm a veteran spouse, suffered the same challenges as many of you have faced. I've become a veteran relationship expert. I'm a life coach, an NLP practitioner, and I work to share and give support that we didn't have in the very beginning. So I hope this class helps. It is about finding your starting place. We know we love our veterans. The problem is, how do we grow that relationship and turn it into healthy and happy and loving when we're completely overwhelmed? There's a few tools that you'll need, a few supplies that you'll need, the printables that you can download, a notebook that is separate from the printables, a pen or a pencil, a package of sticky notes, and an open mind. Open mind is one of the hardest things to acquire because we're so used to believing that our veterans are the ones who need to change. Our veterans have to change. As a result, very little happens. So this exercise is about everybody changing to make a difference. Some of the challenges that I faced early on when I was like completely overwhelmed was, will they ever change? And I know many of you have asked the same question. Will they ever change? They're broken. Um, they're never going to get it together. Your life will always be like this. I remember hearing those things when I looked for support. That was the thing. I was like, oh my gosh, let me find some support. Very little's out there. And when I started finding people that I thought were places that I could go for support, I would get answers like, run. They're never going to change. It's always going to be broken. They're never fixable. You're never going to have a good relationship. Your life is going to always be like this. People would say, I've been married to my veteran 30 years, and this is just the life you're going to live. I didn't want to live that way. I knew there had to be a better way. There had to be a way that I could find the veteran that I loved so deeply in the very beginning. That person had to show up more times than none. We started to develop tools. When I started having conversations, it was completely and totally overwhelming. So where do you begin? Well, we all know that living with a veteran with PTSD or a TBI or just a veteran in general can have some serious challenges. Their mindset's different. The way they see the world is different. Accepting blame is very difficult for them and is different. Failure is not an option, so we deal with that. There's a lot of deflection that goes on when we try to point out things that are wrong and that we need help with. And so as a result, we get very frustrated and we go through these motions of, hey, I'm overwhelmed, I'm frustrated, I just don't know where to begin. So the first exercise, which is critical, I still use it today. I started using it years ago, and I use it today. I reevaluate today. That's how we refine and move on to next steps, to steps that are better, to steps that, when we got the basics down, people are like, oh, how do you get to where you are today? Because I keep using the tools that work and I just refined the way we used them. So what I want you to do is I want you to grab this notebook. And this notebook is personal. You don't have to share it with your veteran. I think it was probably 2 years in, and we had made huge progress when I shared it with him, and he was like, oh my gosh, look at where we've come from. So he celebrated the victory with me. I would never have shared it with him on day one because it would have been argument, argument, argument. We would have fought. It would have been horrible. I never shared it on day one. About 2 years in, He ran across it, my very first notebook. Now I still have them. And he was like, wow, look at where we've come from. And that is such a great tool, one, to help you not feel overwhelmed, but two, to measure your progress. Okay? You can't get together and put together a plan if you don't know what's bothering you. When there's so much going on, we bounce from thing to thing to thing, and nothing gets accomplished. We see this light at the end of the tunnel, and we always are praying that it's hope. And a lot of times it's a train. A lot of times we get flat out leveled. So we're afraid to even reach for that light. But that light truly is the sense of hope. So what I need you to do with this list, you're going to be like, I can't do it. You can do it. Take a list. Get your notebook. Get your pencil. Get your pen. And it needs to be written down. It can't be a list of things in your mind. It needs to be written down. Because if you keep the list in your mind, it's going to change. The priorities are going to change. The stuff is going to change. And you will continue to add to this list. I want you to write down every single thing about your veteran that bothers you, drives you crazy, makes you angry, gets you frustrated, every single thing. And it cannot just be like, I don't like the way he speaks to me. It needs to be very specific. One of the things that we fought with was I didn't like his tone. I didn't like the way he talked. Well, when I said that, it was a very general statement. I don't like your tone. Well, did that mean I didn't like his tone all the time? And that's how we took it. So when I went back in and said, hey, look, I just really don't like your tone, he took it all the time. And that wasn't true. I don't like the way you speak to me when you get frustrated and angry. I don't like the way you speak to me when we are having a discussion that doesn't go your way. I don't like when you start calling me names. I don't like to be called a bitch. I don't want to be called a cunt. I don't want to be called stupid. I don't want to be compared to your ex-wife. I don't want, and that's how I started. And so it didn't just go from, I don't like your tone. You can write that as your big thing and then just really start to delve into it. And you need to keep this as a running list. You need to spend days working on this list. I don't like the way you slam things around when you get angry. Well, there you go again. What is anger? What is slam things around? We had broken picture frames. A lot of them. I should have invested in plexiglass. I don't like the fact that when you get mad, you break picture frames. I don't like when you get mad, you slam things on the table. I don't like when you get mad that you break stuff and don't really care that you're breaking it. I don't like when you do this. There were times he'd shut down and he'd ignore me and he'd go off and he'd be in his own world. I don't like when you go to the garage and you do this. Well, when I said I don't like when you go to the garage, he's like, okay, well, I guess I'll never go to the garage again. See how that plays out? So be specific. He was going to the garage to decompress, and he sat there, and he drank, 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 and he smoked cigarette after cigarette after cigarette, and nothing got accomplished. And if I walk out there, it was like I was invading his space. If I would say something, he would get nasty. So I had to learn to be way more specific. I don't like it when you go sit in that garage and get so wrapped up in yourself that you don't do anything, that you slam things around even out there, that you yell at me, that you treat me like shit. Again, so I had to be very specific in that list. It was something that I really had to work on in being specific. Now, I'm going to tell you, I found my space to do it. A lot of people are like, I don't have any time to do it. I promise you, you have time to do it. I would do mine in the bathtub. That was like my safe spot. He knew it. It was kind of done from the beginning of our relationship. So I would literally sit in the bathtub, in the bubbles, with a notebook and a pen. Heads up, don't use a gel pen, it smears. And I would write over and I mean like pages. And there were times I would just get on a roll with all this stuff that had come up, and I was like, that. See, because when he drank, sometimes it started 9 o'clock in the morning, most of the time by 10 anyway. And if he didn't take a nap by 1, our day was ruined because he'd sober up from 1 to 6, 1 to 5. Right? So that went on for us. And so there was a lot of that going on. So I had to be very specific. Isn't that, I don't like it when he drank. Well, that's really vague. What didn't I like about him drinking? I didn't like the drunk he had become. I didn't like the way he changed his whole attitude when he was drinking. I didn't like the way that we didn't eat dinner until 11 o'clock at night because he didn't want to sober up. So my list was very specific, and it was this ongoing list that we just continued to write every single day, and I did it for about 5 days. And that list was critical. That list is critical. I hate when, and that's how I started. What you're going to find is you start making this list, no holds barred. This is your personal, private list. It's what you're already saying in your mind that you need to put on paper. It's what you are already saying in your mind that needs to be put on paper. Find time. Do it all the time. I still do it today. I don't necessarily write it every day anymore. I do evaluate the list about twice a month, maybe. Sometimes once a month. Kind of depends on where we're going. But I do evaluate that list. So the list is ongoing. Then what you're going to do, you can put your list away for a little bit. And you absolutely cannot do this when you're mad, angry, or frustrated. So when I start, you need to prioritize that list. Well, if typically it's something that he does, say he yells and screams and hollers, but he typically doesn't slam things around. But this particular time, when you guys got into it, he started slamming things around. Your list, when you start to evaluate and rank your list then is going to be based on the current event. So you don't want it to be slam things around as priority number 1 when the truth is you don't want to be called a bitch. One of the other 5,000 words they tend to use. Okay? So be very specific when you do this list, and when you prioritize this list, make sure you're not already in a fight or in a space. I prioritize my list first thing in the morning. Before I got up early, I had my own coffee, my own space. I prioritized the list at that time. And it took me days, and it should take you days. And you reread it, and you reprioritize it. You just keep doing it. It's really important that you read everything on the list and that you really pick the thing, top 3, that bother you more than anything. The top 3 that bother you more than anything. Prioritize your list. What you're going to find as you do this is this. We're going to, next part 2 is going to be how to talk to them about the list. How do you bring that up? Where do you start working on that? How do you start dealing with some of the things that are on the list? Because right now, let's be honest, if you're here, you probably don't know how to communicate effectively. We didn't know how to communicate effectively. We didn't know how to communicate effectively at all. We spent a lot of time with you do, your fault, you've done this, you're both of us. That's that open mind thing I'm talking about. So we had to prioritize the list so we could communicate the list. I could learn to communicate the list. And what I found was when we really, both of us, worked on the list, and that'll come later, he actually got to do one thing that I do that triggered him. And then I told him one thing that bothered me. And both of us made an effort to work on that for about 21 days. We both made the effort to work on the one thing for 21 days. I went back in and looked at my list again. And even though I had 5 pages initially, as we started to work on the one thing, I realized I could cross other things off the list. That when we addressed one item, worked on that one item, a lot of other stuff just went away. A lot of other stuff just disappeared. It got better. Doesn't mean it never comes back. Doesn't mean that you don't slip up, because you're going to. But when you make a concentrated effort to work on one thing at a time, you will find that so many other things start to fall into place. And that's all. And that's really how we got started. That is how we turned our marriage around, our relationship around, our lives around, was just simply making a list. And if the concept is easy, right? The concept is easy. People are like, oh, well, you're just saying simply make a list. Well, yeah, you do simply make a list. You make a list. And it sounds simple. It's not. It's challenging. It's hard. And then when you start to pick your priorities, which we talk about in the next part, staying true to the task is hard. Getting caught up in the heat of the moment and reverting right back to the bad behavior is tough. Learning to allow them to call you out, or you call them out for the first time about the one thing you're talking about, is difficult. It was difficult for him to say to me, hey, you're doing this, and you said you wouldn't. And I'm like, oh no. And yelling was the thing. And I'm like screaming, but no, I'm not. Just yelling, right? Of course I was yelling. I just didn't see it. So as we started to work through the processes, everything else went away. A lot of, I won't say everything, a lot of stuff went away. You're going to make a mistake. You're going to backslide. You're going to get back into the habit. And it's okay. And it's okay. Because this is not a sprint, an overnight fix, a let's get it together. Because what happens is, I look at where we started and where we are now. And I really have a hard time remembering where we started and getting to where we are now. I look at it and I'm like, when were we really like that? And we were really like that. And I remember when we were really like that, and all of a sudden those things, when I reevaluated the list, probably about the 3rd time, I was like, wow, we don't do any of this anymore. Look at the progress we've made. So a lot of times you don't see the progress while you're in it. That's why the list is so critical. Sticky notes. Sticky notes are imperative in this process. Every time you celebrate a victory, no matter how big that victory may be, you need to write it on a sticky note and put it somewhere. So, even if your victory is, I worked on my list, put it there, stick it somewhere. We went to the grocery store together without an argument. Down, stick it up somewhere. We had an argument that didn't result in pictures getting broken. That was one of the very first sticky notes I wrote. We fought and no picture got broke. Now, look at this. I celebrated the fact that we argued, but we didn't break a picture. So that was progress, right? It was progress. And for people who don't live this life, they don't get it. But that was progress. Maybe it would be, hey, he went to the birthday, didn't stay the whole time, but he went to the birthday party. Huge progress if he'd never go before. Or he went to the birthday party, left early, and didn't show his ass. That may be progress. Celebrate your victories. Absolutely every single day, every day, make a habit of writing some victory on a sticky note and sticking it somewhere where you can see it. I will tell you in the beginning, I stuck mine around my computer screen and I'd shut the computer and when I was done with it. So he didn't see them. Then I was in my office and I started putting them on the wall in my office. And he didn't really come in there a lot. So finally, when he did, he was like, "What are these?" I'm like, "Nothing." He's like, "What are they?" I said, "They're just notes. Notes about things that we've accomplished." He's like, "Okay." Didn't really read them. Now, later on, he's in there reading them. I didn't say, "What are you doing in my space?" I let him read them. He just stood there and read them. He goes, "Wow, we've really come a long way. Wow, look at the good that we're doing." Or, "Look at how you've changed." Or, "Look at how I've changed." Do you know we live in a little camper here, 35 feet. We still have sticky notes in them. We still celebrate our victories and we still have sticky notes in them. Some of your sticky notes may be nothing more than, hey, I did self-care today. I spent 10 minutes doing something for me today. This is how you get there. Utilize the principles. Write the list. It will take about 21 days to really, really notice a change. The changes will begin to happen almost instantly. You will be so amazed at how making a list, just the list alone, just the list alone, the list by itself will start to give you relief. The list will give you a path. You writing the list is the very beginning of why you're doing what you're doing. And it will change your life. A simple list. Spend time on it. If you have questions, message me. If you have questions, we'll work through that. Work on your list. It is critical as you go forward. I hope this helps, and I know you're being like, she's asking me to write down a bunch of shit that I already know. I am. But if you want to know how we went from arguing, fighting, broken dishes, broken pictures, violence, both parts, screaming, hollering, alcoholism, to a life that we don't do that anymore. There isn't any more alcoholism. There's very little arguing and screaming. We may argue, we don't scream. There's nothing getting broken, nothing getting slammed around. There's a whole lot of respect. And it all started with a list. A simple list. I promise you, if you follow through, do the list, and work the steps, you will see a change in yourself and in your bedroom. Because the relationship you're going to change first is the relationship with yourself. And as you do that, your relationship with your bedroom will. Part two, stay tuned. It is available, will soon be available. Please follow the steps in order. I'm encouraging you to follow the steps in order. Stacy, everyone has a blessed day. Work on your list. There's tons more coming. And remember, you're loving my veteran. I love mine every day